Good afternoon. My name is Anastasia Vanavskaya, and on behalf of UNWTO, I would like to welcome you all to our Rebooting the Industry, Reshaping the Strategy webinar. As the organizers of this event, we see its main objective to serve as a platform to exchange ideas, share experiences and insights for them to be used to help us to overcome that negative impact that we as an industry had as a result of the coronavirus crisis. To achieve all of this today, we have a fantastic panel of experts with us. And without further ado, I would like to pass my virtual microphone to the moderator of this session, a senior partner at McKinsey and leader of its global travel practice, Alex Dichter. Over to you, Alex.
Thank you, Anastasia. And to everyone, I see we've got multiple time zones out there, so I'll say good morning, good afternoon, and good evening to some. Obviously, for those of us that spend their time in the travel industry, I think it's safe to say that we've never seen anything like this. I was looking through the questions that some of you sent beforehand, and one of them was whether or not the hotel industry had ever seen a crisis as bad as this. I think the answer is, at least at a global level, unequivocally no. I think there have been some war zones where at a local level, the industry has seen an impact like this, but we've never seen anything like this. In April, global tourism was down almost 95%. If you'd asked me 6 months ago what the deepest global shock I could possibly have imagined was, I might have said minus 30%. And yet here we are. Our models at McKinsey show that we won't likely see normal traffic volumes until 2024. This is going to be a very slow recovery. And at some point, that recovery will be driven by the depth of the economic hole that the world is digging itself out of. At the end of the day, GDP matters to global tourism. But over the next 6, 12, or perhaps even 18 months, as long as COVID-19 is a real threat, and before a vaccine or a treatment has been scaled globally, we're dealing with a more complicated situation than economics. And that's the combination of government protocols, open borders, closed borders, restrictions, and a general sense among the traveling public that it is safe and reasonable to go out and travel. And to do all of that in a world where information is changing, by the day. And so we thought we would frame our discussion today around 4 themes. One is our post-COVID lockdowns exit strategies. And post-COVID is probably the wrong word because it's still out there, but rather post-lockdown exit strategies. How do we open up in a way that is both safe and allows our economies, and particularly our tourism economies, to function? How does the offer need to change, product and price? How do we communicate differently? And then last, but certainly not least, what sort of health and safety protocols do we need to put in place to ensure that people are both comfortable, but also, importantly, that we're not making things worse? And to answer those questions, we've got a great panel today. I'll introduce each of you very briefly at a title level, but I'll then ask each of you to introduce yourselves. We've got Rob Paterson. Rob is the CEO of Best Western Hotels in Great Britain. Eduardo Bosch, who's the Chief Operating Officer of the Louvre Hotel Group. Caroline Leboucher, Director General of Atout, is the destination marketing organization for France. And then Sandra Carvao, who's the Chief of Market Intelligence and Competitiveness at the UNWTO. And so I think it's a particularly good lineup in that we've got the private sector represented, but we also have a destination represented. And then we've got a global perspective from Sandra, from a non-government organization, who's able to see, how governments and the private sector are working at the global level. So why don't we actually flip the order around, because we're going to go in a slightly different order as we go through the questions. But if each one of you wouldn't mind just giving a couple of words about your background and maybe a sentence or two around how you're spending your time right now, and maybe start with Sandra.
Thank you. Well, thank you so much, Alex. Great to be with all of you from, as Alex said, good morning, good afternoon, or good evening, wherever you are. My name is Sandra Carvao, and just to give you an idea, I've been with UNWTO, which is the UN Agency for Tourism, for the last 17 years. And I think unprecedented is a very small world for what we're seeing at this moment. I actually coordinated the crisis committee during 2009 economic crisis, and what we faced by then has no comparison with what we're seeing now. I think, like everyone else in this call, I've spent most of my time on virtual platforms in the last 2 months. Our main concern was obviously the immediate impacts at UNWTO, and to support governments into mitigating the impact, particularly on enterprises and jobs. I think that was our priority in the first moments of the crisis, in obviously always monitoring the impact, and also bringing those numbers up, and sharing them as much as possible with everyone. And now, since we're starting to see very gradual signs of reopening, supporting the countries in that restarting with all caution and all responsibility.
Great, thank you, Sandra. Caroline?
Yes, hi Alex, hi everyone, and good evening or good morning. I know that we have attendees from Tokyo and Singapore and the US, so hi to everyone. So I'm Caroline Leboucher, I'm the CEO of Atout France, which is the French NTO, as Alex mentioned. I joined Atout France last year. So I must say that that's quite a way to start with this new job. Once I've done that, I guess that it would be difficult to imagine anything worse than the current situation we have to cope with. As Sandra said, and as everybody around here, the last couple of weeks, months, were used to adapt to the conditions created by the lockdown, both in France and the various markets where Atout France is located, which are 32 countries, by the way. So it means that as soon as last January, we could live in a new world with COVID. So both from a personal point of view and from a professional point of view, of course, this means that there have been many challenges to adapt and to get a new organization and create new services as well, and imagine being creative. And apart from adapting our services, we took part in the setting up of a global recovery plan with the French travel industry and the French government. I'd probably dwell on that later on during the seminar.
Great. Eduardo.
Thanks, Alex. Hi, everybody. This is Eduardo Bosch. I'm the Chief Operating Officer for Louvre Group. We're talking Louvre Group. It's 1,600 properties around the world. And we are part of Jinjiang Group, which is the second largest hotel company in the world, with more than 10,000 properties around the globe. What I've been doing in the last months, I would say a lot of things. First, I just arrived to Europe just before the lockdown. It was 21st of March. I was coming from Colombia, where I used to be based in the last 4 years. And I've been working in all the South America. Before that, I was working in Italy for 9 years. I'm originally from Spain, so quite used to, let's say, living abroad and working abroad. And just arrived to Paris the 21st of March, just right in the middle of this incredible crisis that we are managing right now. And what I have been focused on this the last months have been really focused on be ready for adapting the properties. I've been working lots with the teams, ensuring that we have all the focus on ensuring all the safety and hygienic measures in place in the properties. We've been working lots with the government, especially with the French government, to ensure also that we help on the strategies for the industry. And we have been also working on two different, let's say, phases, which is one is to prepare the contingency. After the lockdown, we were expecting a contingency or more a crisis, an economic crisis, which is what we're living so far. So we have been also preparing the contingency. And last but not least, we have been working also on the recovery. More than 350 people coming from our properties, from the headquarters, working together to understanding how we can adapt ourselves, doing brainstormings. More than 30 hours of brainstorming have been managed in order to ensure that we get all the knowledge from the network, our network, and to properly prepare the different strategies for the recovery phases. So basically what we have been done in the last 3 months.
Great, thank you, Eduardo. And Rob.
Well, good morning, good evening, or depending on where you are in the world. So yeah, I'm Rob Paterson, the CEO of Best Western in Great Britain. We started the year we have our conference every year in Great Britain, annual conference, and in January we started with the theme of ambition. And Best Western in the UK, or the company behind Best Western, was established in 1968. It's been there for a very long-standing organization. It has members that have been there since inception, so there's many members of multiple decades. So really strong, well-recognized business in the United Kingdom. And we started with the theme of ambition. And we had a huge ambition. There was a great relationship between the board and the exec. And it was just late January, last week into January, we launched our ambitious plans for 2020. And just a little over 60 days later, we were pretty much in the mode of locking everything down. So incredible how quick this crisis has taken effect. And those ambitious plans to change the structure of our organization after so many years have been put on the back burner. It became a situation of survival and now recovery. So a really interesting last few months, challenging, and just learnt so much and found all of us have found ourselves doing things that we probably never ever thought we'd have to do. So yeah, that's me.
Terrific. Well, thank you all for the introductions and sharing a little bit about what this journey has been like for you. This has been an incredible time. Let's start by talking a little bit about how you are all thinking about the post-lockdown period. And so the challenge that every destination and every player in the industry is facing is, how do you open up a destination in a way that both feels safe to locals, safe to tourists, but also allows the industry to function at some level. And maybe, Sandra, we'll start with you, for a global perspective. What does the UNWTO recommend to destination organizations and to the private sector for how to open up post-lockdown in a way that navigates that very fine line?
Thank you, Alex. I think from our point of view, our basis has always been the issue of collaboration and cooperation. I think this crisis has shown that obviously we're facing a situation no one can solve alone. And if we don't create platforms and mechanisms of collaboration, either for the protocols or for consumer confidence or for in terms of supporting the industry, we won't get anywhere. So we've created early in March a crisis committee with the relevant agencies such as WHO, UNWTO, ICAO for air transport, but also representatives from the private sector such as IATA for the airlines and WTTC for the tour operators and hotel groups. And we came out with a group of recommendations to what we call restart tourism. And basically the principles which are based on is very much coordination among all levels of government. And I think this is probably one of the biggest challenges that all countries face, is how do you get all levels of government at national level, but also between the national level and the local level to collaborate in identifying the necessary protocols, putting them into place, but also communicating. Perception for consumers, I think this is going to be, and probably from the private sector perspective, how do we make sure that those protocols are clear to people? And I think the travel restrictions at this moment is probably the biggest challenges we face because they're volatile. We see how they change on a week-to-week basis, which at the end of the day follow also the situation in terms of the epidemic. So I think the biggest challenge is really to create those mechanisms of coordination and cooperation. And those are the guidelines we're passing to our member states to make sure that they create inside each government a structure that allows them to deal with the situation from a tourism perspective, supporting the private sector. We know that the sector is made of SMEs mostly, so those need to survive. Even if we restart and we see restart with domestic tourism slowly, with some markets closer by, but still, that is a very small fraction what we're seeing at this moment. And you just mentioned the numbers. We came out yesterday with our assessment from January to May. We were down 97% in April in international tourist arrivals and 98% in May. We've lost during this 5 months 3 times as much in international tourism receipts as we lost in the whole of 2009. So we really need to sustain the companies and the jobs at the same time as we reopen. So it's a parallel system that we really need to be able to coordinate at all levels.
Thank you. Those numbers are staggering. Maybe flipping to you, Caroline. How do you think about the reaction to different numbers that you see from the epidemiology front? Sandra mentioned the fact that restrictions are changing in many countries. You must be in a position of needing to react quite dynamically to different environments as you see the numbers change. How is France dealing with that?
Yeah, exactly. So what Sandra just said shows that we have 2 main challenges then, which the first one, of course, was to survive from the industry point of view. As Sandra put it, with no activity or very little activity for 3 months. So we had to imagine and set up a survival plan to support the industry. And that was done in a very collaborative manner between the national and local public authorities, as well as the French travel industry. And we had a weekly meeting with over 100 people connected, virtual meetings, of course, every week as soon as March to discuss about the needs, the difficulties the industry had to face. And that enabled the adoption of a massive supporting plan for the industry of 18 billion euros in terms of financial support and furlough, because, as you know, the travel industry is really a matter of human relationships and competences. And so it was very important to make sure that those competences, those employees will not be lost once we are able to open up again. So that was the first phase and the first challenge. And then the second one is how to strike the right balance between this necessary economic recovery and starting and rebooting the industry again, and striking the balance with health measures, how to ensure and when would it be okay to restart such and such activity, such as restaurants or cafe, for example, or when would it be okay to reopen certain borders, market per market. So that was the second challenge, how to strike the right balance between those 2 objectives, which obviously are not going in the same direction right now. And last but not least, I think that we all have to cope with uncertainty, and that's probably our main challenge, as you mentioned, since we don't know what will happen tomorrow. Certain borders might suddenly be closed again. Certain markets might open from tomorrow on. You know that the EU established a list of 3rd countries for which the Schengen area was open. But obviously, most of those countries have not decided yet to open their own borders to EU travelers. But from one day to another, they might suddenly decide that it's open. So we have to get ready for such opportunities. And we have to be prepared for various scenarios and always being very flexible, agile, and really collaborative, as Sandra mentioned.
Thank you. Maybe switching to the private sector, Eduardo, how has Louvre Hotels prepared for the post-lockdown period? How is it going in the early days?
Right. So what we have done here is that first of all, we have focused strongly on all the health and safety measures to ensure that we give to both our guests and our employees the safe side of the business, that they are safe on our properties, both working or visiting the property. And we have put in place more than 200 health and safety measures. So this help us. We have been very focused on that. And instead of doing of certifying protocols, and I take what Sandra was saying, we have been working together with the French government in order to use the protocols and the propositions coming from the work team that have been done, and defining all the charters for the different countries. So what we have done is that we take the commitment charter of the French government. We have applied the 100% of all the measures that have been asked, and instead of certifying and putting efforts on certifying protocols, we have been working strongly on the execution part. So this is why we have created two partnerships with one of the main laboratories in France, which is Mérieux, and NSF for international countries, in order to certify the execution of the protocols, which we believe it's one of the priorities, not the protocol in itself, but how we execute these protocols in the different properties. And this is have been one of the main, let's say, focus areas during this period, and especially we have reopened our properties before the rest of the competitors. This is giving us, from one side, is giving us a competitive advantage, but from the other side, is putting us, challenging us ourselves, and using our brands as pilots for the rest of the market. So we have been really focused on ensuring this execution on the protocols. That have been one of the main activities that we have done, and that we keep doing and adapting on the evolving rules on the different countries, because what we're seeing also is that the different countries are reacting on a different way. So we need also to ensure that we adapt, because the French strategy is not the same as the one that we're using in Germany, in Italy, in Spain, or even outside from Europe, in Brazil or in China or in other countries. So ensuring that we are adapting to the local government rules, and really focusing on this execution part with this partnership with different, let's say, laboratories that help us on that. This, I would say, this is the main action that we've been done in the last weeks after the lockdown.
Great. It sounds like you're doing all that you can do under the circumstances. Rob, maybe pivoting to something unique to your situation. The UK early on sort of promoted the idea that much of the summer's tourism industry would be domestic travel, and almost first major post-Brexit, embrace of UK for the UK. Your hotels, in many cases, are well positioned for that. Are you seeing that resurgence in domestic travel? Is it picking up for what's being lost internationally? And how are things going?
Yeah, it's we definitely are seeing a much quicker resurgence and recovery of business than we expected to see. But what I would say is it's caveat that with it's very location and hotel type specific. So just to give some color around that, our call center just last week was, for the first time, took more revenue last week than it did in the same week 2019. And our website has about 4 days now, I think, between the reopening on the 4th of July and the devolved governments a couple of weeks later. Our website has taken more than last year on 4 occasions as well. And we're only lagging, on a weak position and a trend position, we're only lagging just a slightly behind last year. So the recovery's been probably a lot quicker than we expected. But then when you start to dig into where those recoveries are, The South Coast, Cornwall, Devon, Bournemouth, those areas are doing very well. The leisure destinations like the lakes, running mid to 70s, even 80s occupancy. But then you go to a London or a central Manchester or Birmingham or whatever it might be, and you're sort of staring down the barrel of in some cases 10-15% occupancy. So it's very sporadic. Our leisure levels have come back, and when you take a step back from that, it sounds great, but you're coming from a standing start. So our leisure campaigns that we're running through our website or our call centers or whatever like that in the previous years would have had restrictions on a capacity, because hotels would have already been busy or full, and they would have limited how much they would take. And now, there's availability everywhere, and everyone will take whatever they can, and the offers are very strong. So I think you've got to caveat the fact that, yes, our revenue bounce backs have been good in terms of booked revenue, but you're coming off a zero base, and the city centers are absolutely ghost towns.
Yeah. That doesn't surprise me about the city centers, but I'm thrilled to hear that business has bounced back so robustly in coastal areas and in leisure destinations. I think that's a testimony to price and offer needs to change. I think both in reaction to what's going on right now, but also potentially, to prepare for COVID or whatever comes next. And certainly we've seen a number of creative things from industry. The hotels in China were selling subscriptions to breakfast buffets. We've seen hotels in vacation destinations that have difficult entry protocols offer extended stay offers. So stay for a month, stay for 2 months, stay for 3 months, these sorts of things. And I think that's all very reactionary and in the moment. But Sandra, maybe we'll start with you. I know you're talking to destinations around the world and tourism businesses around the world. What advice would you give around how the product and offer needs to change in response to what's happening today?
Well, I think definitely we're seeing, as it was mentioned, a surge in domestic market. The challenge obviously is we do have countries who have a significant basis for that domestic market, but we also have a lot of them who have a very small basis. From a UNWTO point of view, when we look, for example, at the Caribbean islands or other islands, small island developing states, which are highly dependent on international tourism, it's difficult to do that shift into a domestic market. The same thing when we look at some of the African countries, for example, or even some destinations in Asia. I think in Europe, we have an advantage in that sense. First of all, in terms of connectivity, most of the countries in Europe have a good network of transport. Economically, we do have a middle class that is available and also willing to travel, because often they cannot now go outside. So you have both cases of people who would travel abroad, who would now stay home, and those who already would do that stay. But naturally, this is, as I mentioned before, it's a fraction of the market, but it's the market that exists. And as you said, at this point, we need to be creative. I think rural areas have a huge opportunity. We need to be careful also to balance communities and traveling, because I think this is a very important point. Rural communities need to be welcoming people coming from major cities, and that needs to be catered for. We see an opportunity in nature tourism. I think there's obviously people want to go outside, they want to be in nature. We've been closed for 3 months at home. We all urge that. I think family-oriented products, because most people will want to spend their holidays with what we in Spain call the unit of confinement. So the people that you have mostly been in contact during your lockdown, because you might not want to enlarge that. And I actually wanted to share a story. We were in the Canary Islands very recently to see how the protocols were being implemented. And one of the hoteliers was just saying, we did a survey with our clients, and most of their concern is not the protocols, is the behavior of other tourists in the hotel. So I think it's also, we're seeing that from a social point of view, which is the behavior of each of us in terms of the responsibility that we have. I think that's an important point. But I think there's a lot of opportunities of new products And then obviously it depends on the destination, their capacity. Caroline was mentioning flexibility and adaptability, I think, are going to be the key in the current circumstances.
Yep. Very, very helpful. A couple of the points that you've raised, just to share some data. I think one, the natural interest that people have in, more remote destinations, we're certainly seeing in surveys where sun and beach destinations and mountain destinations are outperforming city destinations by a long shot. And at the same time, we see some surprising data in the US. About a month and a half ago, an organization called Adara released a view of what people are searching for. It's a data set that combines internet bookings with internet searches across channels. And interestingly, in the US, there was a big inflection point in September bookings. And the destination that was leading all others in terms of its performance versus last year was Las Vegas. And so at some point, I think people are saying that they believe that this will be behind us at some point when that happens. But they don't want to necessarily be outdoors protected from people. They want to party and they want to be surrounded by their friends. So we'll see. Caroline, so Sandra's talked about the advice she would give globally. What advice would you give?
Okay, so we conducted a survey on the French domestic market, as well as 10 international markets, our main markets, and what are people intentions and what are travelers looking for. And as Sandra mentioned, of course, not surprisingly, they're looking for open space, they're looking for nature, which is a reason why city centers are ghost centers right now, especially in Paris. And they're looking for seaside, they're looking for countryside, and for the mountains as well, which is good news for the French Alps, for example. They're looking for outdoor activities, they're looking for well-being activities, very important well-being, because we all need somewhere or another to heal after the lockdown, and especially those who have suffered or been ill or suffered the loss of their loved ones. The priority is very high on staying together with friends, relatives, very close relatives as a group or group of friends. That's another very high tendency. And trends, and individual accommodations. What are the international travelers and French travelers are looking for? Not interested in staying in big hotels or compounds. They're looking for individual dwellings, accommodations, and that's a new trend that is quite interesting, really. Then another trend that we found, that the number one top priority is really health measures, and that might include, as Sandra put it, the behavior of a guest and of a staff as well, and flexible booking and cancellation policy. That's really top of mind for both French and international travelers, as revealed by the survey that we conducted.
Very, very thoughtful. Eduardo, what is Louvre Hotels doing from an offer standpoint in order to attract customers that might be new and different?
Actually, I'm joining both Sandra and Caroline that the guests and the clients as a whole, they are changing their behaviors, they're changing their mindsets, and so we need to adapt our offer to ensure that we get the maximum demand out of this new way of, let's say, booking, a new way of adapting their holidays or their business trips. So actually, what the first thing we have done, and it just is mentioned by Caroline, which is flexible offers. So what we're seeing is that when we're seeing our segmentation of the type of guests we have, we're missing the corporations, we're missing the business groups, we're missing the leisure groups. So most of our business is coming from transient, so public rates and promotional rates, but it's transient. So what we have done is we have readapt all the strategy to ensure that we get the maximum out of this segment. Without, in the case of Europe, and you have different behaviors in the different markets. If we focus on Europe, we're not starting any kind of war prices with our competitors. We believe that the client is not that sensible to price in this moment. They're more sensible to the flexibility of the rates. And this is what we're seeing, and this is the promotions, adapting the promotions to flexible rates is giving us very good results. But there is in other countries, like in China, for instance, where prices dropped dramatically. You have a high occupancy rates, but with really drop in the prices. Which is a totally different behavior of the clients and the guests. So it's quite important to understanding for every single country how to adapt our strategy. And for Europe, we are much focused on this maintaining prices and giving all the flexibility to our clients. Also, what we have done, it's also preparing different products for the corporations. We believe, and this is something that you were saying at the beginning, that this crisis is probably the worst crisis that we will manage in our professional careers. It's going to be a very long crisis. We're going to take a very long time to recover, let's say, the 2019 demand that we used to have. So it's also important also to adapt all the strategies for the different segments. We believe that the business groups and leisure groups will back, but they will take longer. So how we can adapt the products for them, also for the corporations. We believe that in September we will see a little bit more of corporations. If the second wave in Europe is not coming, even if we're seeing that, depending on the different countries, we're seeing some, let's say, not enthusiastic information or not enthusiastic news about the possible second wave. I believe, and this is something that I strongly believe, that there is no one country in the world that will be able to lock down again the whole country, because economically speaking, is not manageable. The countries cannot manage anymore. But we will see that there's going to be up and downs regionally, locally, and so at the end of the day, we believe that in September we're going to see a bit of more corporations coming. So we are also adapting our offers to the corporations to ensure that we give them more digital tools to book, to make the process easier to book. We're reviewing also all the strategies with the different partners, with the OTAs, with the agencies, traditional agencies, reviewing how we can adapt our offers to be where the clients are asking to be, and obviously ensuring first the health and safety issues always in the properties to really make comfortable the stays, but safe stays for both clients and guests.
That sounds quite consistent with what I've heard a number of global hotel groups doing. I think particularly the focus on maintaining price is an important lesson learned from prior crises. Rob, switching to you, Best Western, as I understand it, is kind of a membership model. Most of your hotels, if not all of them, are independently owned and encouraged to maintain their own identities in addition to the Best Western brand. Does that present a challenge in aligning members and owners on consistent price, offer, and promotion strategies in this world, or for the most part, owners taking your advice?
On a different, on a number of different topics, we've sort of had a different approach. So if we talk about price, it's a very independent approach. We went out immediately on the recovery with a brand offer, and it's an opt-in basis. Our members have the choice to come into the brand offer or not. But in terms of participation, it's the highest one that any of the staff that are in the corporate office now have ever seen. It was above, I think that it was there was only 5 or 6 hotels out of 307 hotels who declined to join it. So we had a brand offering, but the price itself is managed by each hotel. And one of the interesting dilemmas we had there was the UK government came forward with like they have in many other governments around the world, a discount in the tax. And immediately this became I think the media tried to play this out of are you giving it or not giving it? And the reality is, in the hotel world, we were already had offers out in the market that were well further down against what the VAT break was. So it became a situation, are you giving it or not giving it? And we simply went out to all our hotels and said, do you want to? And we'll just support your position. So some were very adamant and said, yes, absolutely. I'm going out to all my corporates and I'm going to proactively give it. Some are like, look, I'll give it if I get asked. And others were like, I'm not giving it. It's a business to business incentive. So you do have those challenges along the way. Our view is to play on the strength of that, because what you get from an independent hotel, whilst we have various standards that run across the markets, you get a very personalized local service delivery, and that's kind of been something that people are looking for at the moment. That's played into our hands and helped some of our recovery. In terms of the safety side of things, we took a different view, because whilst we're a membership organization, we had to ensure the safety of our guests, and that was just a paramount position. So our board, which is a member made up of members nominated and elected every year, so our board own a hotel within the brand. So they have, I think that adds a strong level of currency in terms of decision making. And we did actually vote and mandate our safety protocols across the whole group. So that was one exception we took, but pricing is very much individual, and yeah, it does present its challenges.
Great. Well, that's good to see that that there's that kind of alignment around the things that matter most. Your example about the VAT refund issue or the tax issue, I think, is a good segue into the next topic, which is communications. Certainly in our research, we have found that the single biggest differentiator for how fast destinations come back is the clarity and consistency of their communications. I won't name the destination, but I'm in a destination at the moment that has changed its policy on whether or not borders are opened or closed, and to whom, five times in the last 8 days. And each case has had to issue a clarifying press release to explain what it meant in the sense. Don't know what to say. Airline employees don't know what to say. Lots of confusion all the way to the border itself. And that, I think, extends to every part of the ecosystem. And so, again, maybe, Sandra, let's start with a global view. What advice would you give to both destinations and the private sector for how to manage communications in a world where, indeed, the world we're trying to manage is changing day to day?
Thank you. I think that's probably the biggest challenge we face at this moment. First of all, we can't forget that the changes are obviously dictated by a factor that we don't control. And I think this is the most difficult for us to manage, in a sense, because at the end of the day, it's the number of cases that every day comes out that determines a decision by a government to close or to take specific measures in terms of further safety and security in the different destinations. I think there's an important point here, which is, again, transparency. And also, I think it's difficult to make long-term plans. And I know it's obviously very difficult at this moment. If from 1 week to another there's quarantines, or from 1 week to another a border that was open is now closed. Even internally, we're based in Spain, and in some of the communities, they're now requesting for citizens from other communities to register when they arrive. So I think there's two challenges here. One is, I think we need to be better at using technology. I think one of the things that we need somehow to collaborate more is how do we power the technology that we all know it's there to somehow implement mechanisms that allow us to trace people. I think this is one, health authorities have mentioned this. We need to be able to trace people, to isolate the cases. And again, this is a balance, as Caroline was saying, between health and economics. And I think we need to be better at coordination and the use of technology for that. The second point is how to communicate to consumers. And here there's almost all the points of the travel journey, it's very difficult when you go, I need to go to the website of my origin country, I need to go to the website of my destination country, maybe not the country, but also the destination within the country might have different rules. So I think, and it's interesting, the European Commission made a very big effort in the beginning of the reopening process to have a website where you can find information about the situation in all countries. I think we need to collaborate more internationally, and this is really something that from UNWTO we've been calling on governments to sit down. It's not saying that that's going to immediately take restrictions out, but they need to be managed in a different way. And I think international collaboration, and we've heard from UN Secretary General Antonio Guterres saying that we need to step up our capacity to collaborate as governments internationally.
Yeah, I think that's to even a lay person observer pretty evident as we watch the country-to-country confusion and all of this. Caroline, in France, I mean, you're not making up the regulations, you're not making up the protocols, but you're helping to communicate them. What are you doing that's working?
Okay, so as Sandra mentioned, the big thing was how to communicate with consumers or with the profession, with TOs and travel agencies, to first reassure, inform, but striking the same balance at the same time, and keeping and letting and keep them dreaming about visiting France. So how do you communicate while giving information about health measures implemented, which have nothing to do really with dreaming, because it calls you back to the health situation, which might cause anxiety, really, and how do you strike the balance with keeping dreaming and the notions of pleasure, of enjoying vacations. So this is the main difficult part of it, really, for the time being. And I think that being authentic and being transparent, as Sandra mentioned, is very important. So we had to decide how to do that. And that meant really changing the way we communicate as an NTO. And that meant that we had to show the reality of visiting France, of traveling in various destinations, enjoying staying at a hotel, going to a campsite, going to the seaside, etc., or visiting museums or theme parks. And we had to think about how can we show this and be authentic. So we finally decided that we would use social media influencers. And we have thousands of them right now in the various French destinations, being active in the various destinations, including overseas territories, and enjoying various experiences, staying in various types of accommodations, going to restaurants or cafe, terrace, or having various outdoor activities. And that's very important because thanks to their videos or pics, you can see people wearing masks while enjoying various activities. And you can see various landscapes as well, and people having fun. So that's the way we try to strike the balance between reassuring, showing how health measures are implemented, but at the same time, showing that you can enjoy very fun and very nice vacations with your loved ones. So that's the way we dealt with that. And social media and, of course, digital means are very important. And that's probably a way of accelerating the way various NTOs are communicating on social media, and probably that's a very good time for social media influencers as well.
Thank you. Eduardo, Caroline described both a shift, in communications towards the exploration phase of the consumer decision journey, exploring and dreaming, but also a shift towards social media. Does that reflect the kind of changes that you're making, or are you doing something different?
Actually, what we're doing is first of all, it's in our communications, two types of communication: the commercial communication and the brand communication. We're investing millions of euros on communicating because first we believe that we need to ensure people that traveling in our properties is safe, and this is something that's quite important. So we're investing, as Caroline was saying, lots of on social media. We've been also working on the solidarity part. During the lockdown, several of our properties have been helping the government for supporting the needs of the government in terms of having accommodation for police staff, for medical staff, and so on. So we have been also communicating lots on the solidarity part. We've been communicating also lots on the health and safety measures to ensure people that we fully believe that we need to be all aware about the rules that we need to follow in the different countries, but without panicking. I believe that there is too much information crossing in the newspapers and in the news in general, and people is getting, especially I believe in the Latin countries, especially there is quite of emotions there, and we need to reduce a little bit this emotional part. It is safe to travel. It is safe to go to the properties. It's just a matter of everybody. We're just wearing our mask. This is something that now it's part of. You put your watch on your hand and you put the mask on your pocket. It's just a matter of getting used to these different measures, but ensuring people that we can do this. And we have been also joining, and just to follow the example of Caroline, I have been also following the measures that the communication strategy from the different governments. For instance, we have been also using the hashtag of cet été je visite la France, who have been launched by the French government, and this is kind of the how we work together with the different platforms, different countries, in order to ensure that we all can travel again without panicking that much, with getting all the rules and ensuring all the measures, but without panicking.
Great, very helpful. And it's great to see you picking up on some of the communications that are coming from a country level. I think it's exactly the kind of collaboration and cooperation that we need. Rob, again, how is this different as a membership organization, and how does that influence what you are communicating versus what your individual members are communicating, and what's changing?
Well, on the safety topic, as I said before, we took a really unified approach to this, and it wasn't a difficult one to roll out. Quite often in a membership organization, when you try to roll something out at a brand level, it's like, use the term, herding kittens. Yeah. It's quite you have a very independent mindset, and each person wants to do their own thing, and that's the way the contracts are structured. So quite often it can be very difficult. And I would say what the crisis has done has brought us together as a membership organization. And there was certainly, there was a desire and a wish for a brand to say, listen, just tell me what I need to do, because I want to open safely. So the membership organization, holds on dearly to its independence, but we share a common theme that we all want to provide a safe environment. So it was actually one of the easiest messages I've ever had to roll out. I've only been in Best Western for 2.5 years, but it was probably the easiest brand message I've ever had to deliver. And in fact, it was quite the opposite. It was wanted, it was needed, it was asked for. So I think some commonalities have come together and been born from the crisis. And it was a little bit the same with our marketing campaign when we said, right, what are we going to do to relaunch and recover? And we decided to capitalize on altruism and give a donation from each of our bookings towards our major charity partner. And which it probably wasn't the most popular charity partner in the world at that moment in time. That everyone was trying to give money to the health system, and we thought, look, let's go with the one that we hold true to our hearts, the one that has been our partner for the last 18 months. It was a homeless organisation, And we went out with a message saying each booking we make, we want to donate X amount to the homeless charity. And again, we were just met with overwhelming support, because after 3 months of lockdown, everyone could see that there was a crisis on our hands. And rather than giving free breakfast, which we didn't even know how we were going to serve at that moment, giving a donation was the right way to go. So I think the whole membership organization evolved a little bit through the crisis. And we all, at the end of the day, had a common theme: to get our guests back and do that safely. So that became a little bit of an easier story to manage than we normally would be the case with a membership organization.
Great, good. And again, good to see that alignment. Well, look, let's shift gears into the health and safety topic. And I think we've actually touched on this in your answers to a number of questions already. So I'll keep this fairly focused by framing a challenge. And this is a challenge that I've heard discussed in many sort of multi-industry forums. And that's that, first of all, the data is relatively clear. And that's that for people to be comfortable traveling, they're going to want to feel safe, and they're going to want to see visible signs that you are doing things differently. I've heard some in the hotel industry refer to this as cleanliness theater. The idea that not only is it clean, but you see signs that people are taking this seriously. I saw one hotel advertising a cleaning weapon that looked like it came out of Star Wars or something like this. And at the same time, it's equally clear that for travel to really go back to normal from a volume standpoint, it needs to feel normal. And so in China, we saw that there was a clear inflection point in domestic air travel when the protocols were largely removed. And so when they stopped taking temperatures and when the flight attendants stopped wearing hazmat suits, that was the moment when people said, it's okay. And so there's this challenge where people need to feel safe. And on the other hand, if we talk too much about it, and if we do too much, it also communicates that there's a problem. And the second challenge is the differentiation challenge. And so on the one hand, it's perfectly natural that every tourism organization, whether it's private or public, is looking to partner with authorities who can validate their protocols and co-brand them. And at the same time, there's a risk that we appear to be trying to differentiate on safety. And that's something that the airline industry learned many, many years ago never to do. We do not want to communicate to the public that there are different degrees of safety. There is safe and there's not safe. And we as an industry are safe. And so, how do we balance consistency, if you will, against the desire to differentiate? And so let me wrap that into a single question, which is, what's the sustainable version of this that allows people to feel safe but doesn't scare them? And tells the world that we're doing something without trying to get into a battle around who's doing more. And let's keep the answers focused on this, because I want time for some of the questions that we're getting from the audience, and there are several. But again, Sandra, why don't you start?
Sure. I think there's a concept that we like to use, which is a tourist is a temporary resident. So I think if we look at that, it's like you're sharing a space of a destination. So the important thing is that whatever is in place in that destination, you need to be aware and you need to respect. Obviously, because at the end of the day, those measures are mostly, we must think, for the population. And if tourists come and they feel that they're doing the same as the population, then they're part of that experience of, and I think Eduardo was mentioning something that we tend to forget. We're communicating, as you say, all the protocols. Maybe we need to start communicating and visualizing people, as Caroline said, having fun within those new security measures. And we don't see many of those images. So I think, in a transition to a new normal, which we don't know, as you mentioned in the beginning, how long a massive vaccine or treatment might be available, I think we need to focus on that. The protocols need to be first established with the health authorities. They need to be implemented. If the country decides it has a certification process of itself, then they need to be certified. But the most important thing is that we be able to communicate that tourism is still happening with that new reality in place.
Yep. Caroline?
Yeah, regarding safety and health measures, we did not choose in France to go through a certification process as other destinations chose. We did a benchmark regarding both international and national best practices, and the Louvre Hotel Group, for example, and the Club Med or Accor Group were very good examples for us, because they already had to enact and implement new health standards in China, where everything started. So that was a source of information and inspiration, really. And then there were joint committees between the French industry and the national authorities to establish those health measures for each vertical of the travel industry. And those health protocols were then accepted by the government. So there are very soft rules, but based on a regulatory common standard. So I think that was quite effective. But then, of course, the main part of it is implementation, and both for employees, for the industry, and for citizens, French citizens on the domestic market. How do you get them to accept those new rules and to implement them, especially the face mask, now in all public closed offices and locations in France. That's not easy. That's something you have to communicate a lot about to get things done, and including by the industry, which is doing a tremendous work really to train its employees and to make sure that guests accept and implement those measures as well. But this is key, really, if we want to live all together in an enjoyable as possible new normal situation. As Sandra said, we don't know how long that might last. So if it's gonna last really long, then we should really make sure from day one that we get it right, and that everyone abide to the law and to those new rules. And as I said, thanks to those social media influencers, we could see that it was still possible to have quality time with friends, having fun while wearing a mask and implementing those health measures and health barriers. So this is it. But they're really key to make sure that we don't have to go back to a general lockdown. I think that no one, either the industry or the government or the population, no one wants to go back to that general lockdown situation.
Eduardo, how are you seeing the sustainable version of all of this? You know, if you imagine a year and a half from now, what will we be doing for health and safety, and how will we be communicating that?
At the beginning, joining also what Sandra was saying. At the beginning, I was joining what Sandra was saying regarding how we communicated regarding safety, the safety measures. I agree with her that at the beginning we were communicating even too much, because this is what the clients were asking. They were asking what are the kind of policies you're putting in place, procedures, the measures. We were not that much ready, all the different countries and companies to all the mask, the protection glasses in the reception, in the buffets and so on. So at the beginning it was kind of let's ensure that people understand that we're putting all the measures in place. But now, step by step, we're changing this to do not forget that we're selling experience, that we're selling hospitality and not hospitals. So that we are really focusing on selling experience with all the measures in place, but selling experience. And this is something that what we're seeing is step by step, is moving forward. And actually, what we believe is that the clean and safe level is going to be a standard for the future. This is something that in the beginning, I would say in the 2008, at the beginning of 2008, 2009, when all the financial crisis, after the subprime crisis, what we see it's with the financial economics there, what we saw is that there were a bunch of also initiatives to face this crisis, more focused on the giving low cost prices. There was kind of a completely different strategy. Here we need to adapt and to ensure that this is going to be of a pace, so it's going to be part of our new normal. With more digital, with I would say with a low touch economy, with new touch points with our guests, with the proximity, how we can be closer to our guests, and also the commitment of the brands in the together with the guests. No, and this is something that, for instance, as Caroline was saying, also it's that because we are part of a big group, and in China we had the experience. We are already working on different digital solutions and different, let's say, machines that will ensure, let's say, that from the future this is going to be sustainable, and that we won't be able, let's say, or we won't be with all these measures in place for the future, but the part of them are going to stay forever. So, and this is something that we need to be all clear in mind that this is going to happen.
Rob, same question to you.
So I remember being on a call when the recovery started to show signs of, we were about to enter into an open period. The government was about to announce travel again. We all got on a call in the UK, all the brands organised by the industry body. And I can remember it really clearly. One of the brands was very strong in coming forward and saying, we've all got to do the same here. We've all just got to, let's agree and work together with government on this protocols, and let's not make this an arms race on cleanliness. And no more than 24 hours later, that very brand had launched their own protocols that had gone well above anything we discussed on the phone call. So it absolutely turned into an arms race. And I think my personal view and our view as a brand, we tried to step aside from the arms race and just focus on the government protocols and make it feel as safe as we possibly could around what the government's advice would be. So that was the route we took, but it was absolutely an arms race there. What I found the best thing to come out of this, crisis presents opportunity, and within the space of 2 weeks, we'd gone from sort of starting the conversation to having a live product ready to roll out for mobile check-in. We talked about this for years. And the situation sort of forced our hand into saying, right, we need to come up with something here. And literally in the space of 2 weeks, we had a product, we had a solution, and we had the beginning of the rollout. And within the matter of weeks from that, we had all of our hotels, independently minded hotels, adopting that product and becoming a brand standard. So I think the innovation's been really exciting to watch and see how quickly you can do things when you really put your mind to it. Where there's a will, there's a way. We can talk about it forever, but actually having been faced with the situation where you need to deliver it, great things can happen. And that was, I think, one of the good stories to come out of it. I think technology is going to be a real winner. We can take a step forward in good, sensible technology that keeps hospitality, but doesn't just remove hospitality being a faceless organization.
Great, very helpful. That is a good segue into maybe some of the questions that we're getting from the audience. And we've got a few here, and several of you had written in questions beforehand, and I'll bundle them a little bit. And maybe in the interest of getting to as many of them as possible, I'll target each one of the questions at one of our panelists. Sandra, I'll start with you. There is a question that you may have read on the list, which is, what are destinations, countries, organizations, and what can they do to prepare for the possibility of a second wave? And someone else pointing out that we should probably not use that term. It's probably more localized individual secondary outbreaks that require a real reversal in policy. We now know this a little bit. We understand the playbook. How do we get ready for that?
Yeah, I think there's an important point here, which we're all in test and error moments because this is new to everyone. So I think sometimes we're very Russian saying, this is wrong or this shouldn't have been done like that. I think all governments are facing that challenge of, where do I go next and where do I face that challenge? I think in terms of preparation, I would say, I think scenario planning is probably one of the best key elements at this point, either your private or public sector, because we really don't know how it can develop. I think, as Caroline said, no one wants to see an overall, and Eduardo mentioned it as well, the cost of a general lockdown in many countries has been huge. I think governments probably will take a more approach that is localized depending on the situation. But I think the most important point is to be prepared. And at the end of the day, we can't forget this is a pandemic. This is a health issue. And obviously there is a huge economic impact. But if we don't solve the health issue, that economic impact will not disappear. On the contrary, it will be even bigger. So I think, again, health should be a priority all the time. And from a tourism perspective, the important thing is to work with health authorities and to make sure that the protocols are implemented, that tourism helps deal with whatever health situation emerges. And we were talking about transparency and communication. And across governments, I think transparency and coordination in message is probably one of the key elements that, as we enter a new phase, needs to be learned from the previous one.
Great, very, very, very helpful. Caroline, there's a question which I think is an interesting one, and it's posing a question that is kids might be going back to school remotely. Does this create an opportunity for destinations to break out of some of the seasonal peaks and valleys that they naturally see and kind of market themselves as a place where you simply come and work and go to school remotely for periods of time, and maybe create a whole new model for how we market ourselves? Are you seeing that opportunity in France, which is certainly a fairly seasonal destination?
Well, it's not such a seasonal destination, we have tourists and travelers all year round, really. And especially during the fall season, we have many tourists coming to France, and not only, not families, usually, for obvious reasons, but we do have travelers from the other side of the world coming to us, as well as European travelers for short city breaks, for example, and of course business travelers, which is a very important part of the tourism and travel industry in France. So we already see in our surveys a new tendency, and September should be a new August season in France. We can see in Switzerland, Belgium, or the Netherlands, many travelers showing their intention to come to France and visit France in September, not only August, but September as well. So that's pretty new, and we're ready for that, of course. And I think that it's a very good, if it's going to last, it's a rather good thing, because, in the world before the pandemic, we were talking about over-tourism. And we were all wondering how we could regulate flows of tourists. Now we do have to regulate flows of tourists, but for other reasons. So I think that that new trend might be a very interesting one. And by the way, as the UNWTO did, we launched a call for interest for innovative services and projects. And we had many answers, nearly 200, and showing that the sector is a very innovative one and very creative in terms of new services, especially on how to regulate flows and how to adapt to new trends and consuming trends, and especially the one you mentioned, which is how to adapt and offering services to those working from home and studying from home or from another location, which might be France or another destination.
Terrific, and I apologize for my mischaracterization of France. Certainly, when I'm there in August, it feels a bit seasonal, but you know what I mean. Let's switch to Rob. There was a couple of questions, both in the pre-questions and now, around distribution. and how our distribution strategies might change. And the question that was posed online is a provocative one. Will we be going back to OTAs and our normal partners, or is this a time to embrace some of the innovators and new distribution models that are out there?
It's a tricky one. I think people are very much creatures of habit, and the OTAs, just specifically speaking about the OTAs, they have a very well-placed, well-positioned service proposition that they offer to consumers in the sense that, and they have well before they're online, even when they're offline, they're able to offer multiple brands in a single destination and offer that choice and make it easy for the customer. So I don't think that fundamental purpose disappears or goes anywhere at the end of this crisis. However, having said that, I think how various operators and various brands have dealt with this may have a little bit of a lasting effect, because some people have been left with a level of uncertainty or sour taste in their mouth because they've been found themselves in a situation where they couldn't get the help that they needed. So we take prepaid bookings before the crisis as an example. A lot of people then immediately went to the place that they booked and says, I want a refund. And that person that said that they're going to, the hotel that they're going to, or cruise, or whatever it might be, are saying, well, actually, you booked that through a third-party intermediary. And you need to go back through them to get the money because they've got your money. And I'm not sure the customer, perhaps we're in the industry and we live and breathe it every day, but outside of the industry, perhaps not everyone understood that. And I think this has shone a light on that, the fact that, where you book, that's where you need to go. It's not necessarily where you stay. And that has left people with a sour taste in their mouth, I think. So that might be an area of change. And of course, as a brand, we're going to try our best to give ourselves leverage out of this and say, look, we need as much support as we can. That whole altruism piece, we're certainly leaning on that and saying, all our prices and all our industry is struggling. Everyone knows that. All our prices are under pressure, and we've given you great discounts. And we are saying, can you book with us direct? Because otherwise we have to give a certain percentage away. And of course, we're going to lean on that topic, but I'm not sure it'll have a huge change in the distribution landscape, in my opinion.
Good to hear. I think because stability is always good. Eduardo, one of the questions which is near and dear to my heart is, what do we do to regain investor confidence? I'm certainly aware that when I help travel businesses sell themselves, either to a private equity firm or to a strategic, or perhaps raise new capital, and one of the questions that I'll get asked, is what does a shock look like? And we'll review SARS and the Gulf War and 9/11 and the terrorist attacks in Paris, and we'll always show a relatively quick recovery. Going forward, we're going to have to talk about this, and this is going to be viewed by investors as a risk that's kind of permanently built into the sector. How do we overcome that?
That's a good question, and actually this is something that we have been working also with the investors that are following us already, that are working with us already. First, I believe that the tourism is going to be, and it's representing between 10 and 12% of the GDP globally. Probably Sandra can confirm this data, but it's almost, I believe it's between 10 and 12, depends on the year. So it's one of the engines of the world, of the economic world. It's one of the fastest way to deliver and to give to not developed countries a higher pace to let's say to get to development. So actually the tourism, understanding tourism is not only as leisure, but leisure and business is one of the main let's say drives of the economic globally speaking. So this is the first point I would like to say. Second is like something that it's quite important for the investors. What we're seeing is that they really, thanks to this crisis, they are really understanding the added value of the auto brands. Because at the beginning they say, okay, if we do not have the auto brands, the contacts we have with the governments, the protocols that we're putting in place, the experience that we're delivering with different brands and the different products, they really need a brand and a strong brand that helping them to develop this business on the proper way. At the beginning, I have to say that investors, they see the tourism as big houses that we can sell and we can manage easily. But when they go into the business and understand the business, it's much more complex than that. It's actually becoming stronger, the complexity of our industry, and I'm aligned also with what Rob was saying regarding distribution, and this is something that we saw in the past weeks when the guests were asking for cancellation, and the intermediaries, the online intermediaries, were saying, "Hey, ask to the property. So what's the added value that you're giving to the process?" This is something that it's giving lots of confidence to the investors, saying, "Okay, strong brands, strong hotel groups can give us much more credibility on the facts and on the general, let's say, economics and return of the investments." This is really an industry that I fully believe that thanks also to this crisis, we have seen that most of the people we're talking a lot about tourism. It's going to be one of the main access for the different governments, Spain, in Europe, and as a general in France, or in all the countries. Everybody was talking about tourism. Tourism is really a pillar of our economy. And this is something that is going to be, for the coming years at least, is going to be like this or even stronger, with cycles like every other industry or every other market, but really, really a strong industry where people want to travel, where people need to travel, needs because of leisure, because of business. We have seen that the digital is giving us, the digitalization is giving us a much more accessibility to talk between each other, and we are doing this. But at the end of the day, after at the beginning, it's even nice. Say, hey, I can work from home, it's nice. But sometime you start realizing that, okay, it's fine, but I need to balance with physical presence. Because otherwise I cannot transmit the message in the same way, and then we need to travel. So I believe that this is an industry to invest, is an industry for the future. It is already for the present, but it's also for the future. And when you are close to a brand, you're getting more profitability to your investments.
Great, thank you, Eduardo. Sandra, one last question from the audience, and I'll combine two together, actually. And that's, what do you see as the most long-lasting and positive changes to come to this industry due to COVID? 10 years from now, we would look back and say that was awful, but thank goodness we learned X, whatever that might be. What would that be?
Well, I hope that I would say three things. One, a different way of managing destinations. I think Caroline mentioned everyone was discussing about over-tourism 6 months ago. And I think this pandemic is an opportunity for us to rethink destination. I would call it management, whatever you want to call it, but the way that a destination is thought of. Bringing communities. I think often we've done that with our backs to the community, with the impact on environment. I think it's something we haven't talked about here, but all these new protocols and cleanness and masks, we need to be careful to see how much this means more energy, more waste. And we can't forget that still that path should be on our mind. I would say the second thing is technology. Rob was mentioning that in 2 weeks they got finally a tool for online check-in. I think the hotel industry has a huge capacity of adaptation, but I think this helped push that adaptation. And to Eduardo's point on the interest of investment, we are a flexible industry and very capable of adapting very quickly, as we've seen. We've been closed for 3 months and we're now implementing the protocols, we're reopening, we're welcoming guests again. So I think that's a spirit of resilience that many industries cannot have because of their own structure. And I think the third thing is data. I think we really need to invest better on data and knowing the consumers on a collaborative way. I think none of us has the answer alone, and we need to invest better in understanding what's happening in the markets on a short term. A lot has been talked about big data and use in tourism, but again, there's an extra mile to do. So if we look back 10 years, I think hopefully we'll be using better innovation, better sustainability, and better technology.
Good. Well, I hope that's true. And certainly, as a couple of you have said, out of every crisis, there is always an opportunity. Look, let me close with a couple of thoughts, and then I've got one quick question for each of you, and maybe building on the investor story, Eduardo, that you shared. I think we believe firmly that travel will be back. This is going to be a tough road to recovery, but the shift globally from people spending on stuff to people spending on experiences, I think is probably the most durable consumer trend on the planet. I mean, I don't know how many people remember their first television or their first VCR, but we all remember our first vacation. And in fact, those things tend to grow in our memories, whereas stuff fades, it breaks, it becomes obsolete. And over the last several months, as a couple of you have mentioned, we have been trapped in our homes, surrounded by our things, which are doing very little for us, and being robbed of our experiences. And so I think everything we see, from how people are searching on the internet and exploring today, suggests that when this is behind us, travel will be back, and it will be back with vigor. And so with that, I thought I'd ask each of you a question, since we're all in this industry, but we also travel. And that's when this is over and when travel becomes normal again and when borders are all open, where will you go? Where's your first trip? And by the way, I'll reflect on the poll. If you haven't had a chance to look at it, the poll asked about a number of discrete destinations. You can, of course, name any destination you'd like, but Caroline, you'd need to know that the French Alps is outperforming every other destination on the poll by at least 5 or 6 to 1. So that's good news for the Haute-Savoie. But I'll start with you, Sandra. Where are you going to go?
Oh, I think I'm going to go against the trend.
Sandra,
and it's not because Caroline. It's not because Caroline is here, and it's totally against market trends. But I'm really longing for a weekend in Paris.
In Paris. Okay, excellent.
Yes, city
and
break.
Caroline?
Well, this is an excellent choice, Sandra. I shall stand to the campaign that we've done, which is Visit France, and go to the Basque Country. So if anyone knows about Basque Country, so it's around Biarritz, where the G7 summit was held. And from a business perspective, I think that as soon as I can, my first visit will be to my staff in China, in Beijing, because they were the first to suffer this pandemic as soon as last January. And I think that it's very important for me to go and visit them.
Great, thank you. Eduardo?
Thank you. It's nice to see that we have properties in all the destinations you're saying, so you're welcome in our properties. In my case, I'm already traveling. I do not stop traveling. Last week I'm based in Paris, but last week I've been in Lyon. The week before I was in Frankfurt. Next week I'm going to Amsterdam, and the week after I'm going to Cracovia, with all the measures and all the safety measures. But I didn't stop traveling, first because I need to be close to the teams, and second because we are asking to our clients to travel again. We need to start doing and then doing as an example, managing as an example to the teams and to the guests. No, so actually this is I'm still traveling with all the measures in place, with all the safety measures, but I'm still traveling, and actually I do not thinking that much on holidays yet. But probably because I just started a new project, as I told you before, in the end of March. So I'm quite more focused today on business and less a little bit on the leisure part.
Okay, and Rob, where will you go?
I think mine's less of a destination and more of a it's an experience for sure. I love what you said about the
Rob, are you
experience
with us?
as well. Yeah. So I would go to a sporting event or a concert or something like that.
Great. Well, those are great aspirations, and I'm confident that you'll have a chance to do all of that relatively soon. Well, with that, I think we're out of time. I'm going to close. Anastasia, I'm not sure if you wanted to say any words. If so, pop on. If not, then we'll close as we are, and I'll thank each one of our panelists for such an interesting and engaging discussion, and for the attendees for great questions. Thank you for giving us so much of your day. I know we're all very busy these days in this industry. Anastasia.
Thank you, Alex. Thank you, panelists, for finding time and sharing with us your insights, your very interesting experiences. I'm sure I'm seeing now the comments popping up that our audience attendees are really appreciative of those. I would also like to say that it is the first but not the last webinar. We are having a series of those. So everyone, including panelists and attendees, are welcome to join our next event, which will be in September. But for now, once again, thank you so much, everyone. And I hope all our wishes and dreams of where to go as soon as possible will come true. Thank you.
Excellent. Thank you all. Bye-bye.
Thank you very much. Bye.
Bye-bye.